So the story of the Akedah has three common elements to the very first story that we hear when God comes to Avram. Look at the two texts. The first one on the left is our very first story about God and Avram, and our story to the right is the story of God coming to Avraham and showing this test. What are the three elements that are the same? And if you could kind of give a hint of why you believe those three elements are part of both of these stories, what is it trying to teach us? And I think it's trying to tell us something about that these are two bookends. These are two of the major, if not the most important bookends of Abraham's life. That all that comes afterwards is, and all that came before is, but these two kind of pillars of incidences are kind of define Abraham and who he is. And so here are those three things, right? Each of them are kind of taking something like kind of narrowing, and each of them are kind of telling him to go to a place where he does not know where that place is. And of course, each of them has that word lech lecha. So of course, we've had the question for a while about how old is this child? And I love how a lot of you just looked in the text itself and say we can learn a lot about that. That there's much evidence to show that certainly he is not that Yitzhak is not a baby. Give me two pieces of evidence that have shown that, which we've kind of seen from the story of the Akedah or even the story before it. Okay. Then we asked a question. Then we asked, well, how old might he be? And Rashi kind of looks at this pasuk right here, right before the Akedah, which says, "Vayagar Avraham be'eretz plishtim yamim rabim," and Avraham was kind of living temporarily in the Plishtim area where Avimelech was for many years. And how old does that? And so Rashi takes that kind of to say, how old is Avram going to be during all these different events, and how old will Yitzhak be as well? And this guy named Reggio says it most clearly, but that's Isaac Reggio from 1780 to 1810, and he says the following: Az Yitzhak ben Lamed Zayin Shana Nitzdavu al Ha'akedah. When Yitzhak was a child of 37 years, Abraham was commanded about the Akedah, about this moment of giving of bringing his son to be bound on the altar. Okay, so that means that now we've got a child that looks a little bit more like that. I actually Googled 37-year-old, and that's who came up. So interesting enough. What I'd like to do is I'd like to go through a close reading of the entire Akedah story and kind of look at every time Rashi has a question and kind of what Rashi's questions are, and just see if we can get from Rashi's answers some kind of sense of how he thinks about this moment, how he thinks about Abraham, how he thinks about what Abraham did, what he followed, and what he did not, stuff like that. So we're going to look at that. So we're going to start with pasuk number 1. And Rashi is going to have two questions about this pasuk. Can you figure out what it is? What they are? Write them down. So here are Rashi's two questions. Rashi says, after these things, and here I am. So after these things, what do you think is the problem that Rashi is going to have? What's he going to be questioning here? And here I am. What do you think Rashi is questioning here? Okay, now we're going to go a little bit further. So here's after these things. So let's go ahead and look at what might be Rashi's problem. But let's look at Rashi's solution. So Rashi's problem here is going to be something like, what does that mean? After what things? Okay, and I spoke about this in class. Actually, Rashi offers two solutions by way of a midrash. There are some rabbis who say after these things that Satan said to God, after the things that Satan said to God when Satan complained, God, you gave Abraham so many things to eat. From all the things he eats, he doesn't even set aside any of it for you. God turned to Satan and said, he loves that boy of his more than anything, and if I tell him to give him to me, he would not hesitate. And then we get the Akedah coming next. There's another idea what after these things. After these things mean after the things that Yishmael did. And what is that? After the teasing that Yishmael did to Yitzhak and said, I was circumcised when I was 13 years old, and I didn't cry at all. You were circumcised when you were 8, and you cried and cried and cried like a little baby. Yitzhak turns to Ishmael and says, you're boasting that you gave one part of yourself, your foreskin, to God. If God asked me to give my whole self, I would not hesitate. So we've got two answers to this question, and my question to you is, according to the first story, who wants this test to succeed and why? According to Midrash number A. According to Midrash number B, who really wants this test to succeed and why? Okay. Next question that Rashi has is, here I am. And what Rashi is going to be asking here is, what is the valence, what is the emotion of here I am? And Rashi's solution is, the word hineni shows humility and readiness. So here's a question for us to answer. According to Rashi's understanding of the word hineni, does Abraham want to go through with this act? Is it something he's been waiting for to prove to others and himself just how great his love for God really is? Yes or no? Please explain. And as a whole, so if we look at these two items, or really this one right here, is Rashi's read is showing Abe as a willing follower of God. Rashi's read shows Abe as a questioner or challenger, or Rashi's read doesn't point one way or the other. One of these answers, please. Okay, next verse. Please take your son, your only son, the one that you love, Yitzhak, and go forth to the land of Moriah and offer him up there as a sacrifice upon one of the mountains that I will tell you of. Rashi has 4 questions about this pasuk. What are they? All right, so here comes Rashi's answer, and here we go. So the first one is, please take. Second question is, your son, your only son, the one that you love, Yitzhak, offer him up, and that I will tell you of. So let's start with please take. What's the problem that Rashi is going to have with please take? This is God talking. Please take. Okay, and let's see. So the problem is, why is God saying please? Right? Why isn't God just ordering? Right? Why does God have this word please? He didn't give that in the first order of go. Right? What's the please all about? And that word in Hebrew is na. Okay, in Rashi's solution, the word na is a form of request and can be translated as please, as if God were saying to Abraham, this is a difficult test, but please, I need you to do it for me, or else people will not think that you have faith in me, and people will not think that I God, am important. Please help me, Abraham, and do what I ask. Or people will say, Abraham did not perform the tests because he loved God. He just performed tests for God because they were easy to do. So, just summarize that for a second. And one additional question. Instead of the Torah being a history of the Jewish people, maybe the Torah could be thought of as God's attempt to have a voice in the world that God created. How does this Rashi, fit with this idea? Okay. Problem number 2. Your son, your only son, the one that you love, Yitzhak. What's the problem that Rashi is going to have here? Okay, and here is the Rashi's problem is, why all these extra words? And Rashi's solution is the following. Your son, Abraham said to God, I have 2 sons. God said to Abraham, your only son. Abraham said to God, this one is the only son of this mother, and that one is the only son of his mother. God replied to Abraham, the one that you love. Abraham said to God, I love them both. God said to Abraham, Yitzhak. So what's going on here? What is Rashi doing with the words your son, your only son, the one that your only one whom you love, Yitzhak? What's going on here? Like, what is Rashi's filling in something, but he's filling in some type of what, right? Okay, and one additional question. We learned in that, so by the way, what is Rashi doing? Rashi is basically saying, we're only seeing a part of a conversation. We're seeing one side of that conversation, God's part of that conversation. But there's another part of this conversation that actually prompts God to keep on saying what he's saying, right? God says, your son, Abraham's saying, but I have two sons. Your only son, but both of them are only sons. The one that you love, but I love them both. No, Yitzhak is the one I'm talking about. Okay. One additional question. We learned in the previous Rashi that Abraham was eager to go through with the Akedah. Does this Rashi support that idea or go against that idea? Please explain. Okay. And we're back to this question again. Rashi's read shows Abe as a willing follower. Rashi's read shows Abe as a questioner. Rashi's read doesn't point one way or the other. Okay. Next question. Offer him up. Okay. So what's Rashi's problem going to be here? A question. Okay, Rashi is going to say, hey, offer him up is not kill your son, give him to me as a sacrifice. Offer him up sounds like lift him up, lift him down. And Rashi says, God said, offer him up. God never says to Abraham, I will cause him to be sacrificed there. It was never God's intention that Yitzhak be sacrificed there. So what is Rashi trying to say? Right? What is the moral of this Rashi? And I would just say as a hint, the moral of this Rashi might actually be the title of our course, right? What do I mean by that? That should help you answer this question. Okay, next one. The one upon one of the mountains that I will tell you of. So we talked a little bit about this class. What do you think the problem here is? Right? Why doesn't God say specifically, right? So Rashi's answer is, God causes the very best of us to wonder, and only later does God reveal God's plan. In this way, God allows the reward of the righteous person to be even greater. God did something very similar when God says to Abraham, called Abraham then, go for yourself to a land that I will show you. So one question to answer here is, according to this Rashi, why does God not reveal God's plan, or even part of it, to Abraham? Number two, does God's withholding the plan make this test harder or easier for Abraham? And maybe Rashi is talking to us as well. Maybe Rashi is telling us that something about what we should be thinking when we do not understand why things happen to us the way they do. What would Rashi's answer be to us in those situations? Beautiful. Okay, two questions here. Can you figure them out? Okay, and here are those questions. Early in the morning, there's two servant boys. So the first one, early in the morning, what's Rashi's question here? Right? Why getting up? Why not just get up? Why go early in the morning? Right? That's the problem. Rashi's solution: the word vayashkem, or getting up early in the morning, expresses Abraham's eagerness to do a mitzvah. He didn't just get up; he got up extra early. So, and I asked the question at the bottom: can you think of any other reason why Abraham would have gotten up early? Okay, and again, what does Rashi's reading show? Is Abraham a willing follower, a questioner, a challenger, or it doesn't prove either way? Good. His two servant boys. What's Rashi's problem? Like, who are they, right? And one of them is Ishmael, one of them is the servant Eliezer, right? And here's my question. Is it first of all, that's very provocative, and Ethan mentioned it today in class, that actually the two people coming with Abraham on this journey are people that could be the future of Abraham, and here they are watching Abraham get rid of this future, the boy who's basically their competition. Okay, here's my question. It's understandable that one of the servants would be the main servant of Eliezer, but why Ishmael? Why would Abe have brought him along? Give me a creative answer, but before you do, think about what we read in the chapter before this one, when Sarah told Hagar and Ishmael to go. It was so hard for Ishmael to do so, and Abraham only does so when God says, listen to Sarah and do what she says. Let's also throw into the mix that later on, and no one knows this except I think for one person who I told, but didn't include it in their presentation. Let's throw into the mix later on, after Sarah dies, the Torah says that Abe married a woman named Keturah, and the Jewish tradition believes that Keturah is Hagar. Crazy, crazy. Okay, answer that question. According to this read, does Rashi, by having the servants be these two kind of potential heirs to the throne, does this show that Abe is a willing follower, questioner, or challenger, or not one way or the other? Okay. Next one. We have one question about this verse. Can you figure out what it is? And here it is. On the third day, what's the question going to be? Right. What happened during that third day? Or why 3 days? Why not 1 day? Why not 2 days? Why not 7 days? Right. Why did God, in Rashi's solution, why did God wait until the third day to show Abraham the mountain? Why didn't God just tell Abraham to sacrifice his son immediately in order that people, why? Here's the answer. In order that people would not say Abraham was excited and hot-headed, he wasn't thinking. He wanted to do exactly what God said, but if Abraham had had some time to think about it, he would have never have done this act. Therefore, God gave Abraham time to calm down, to think about what he was about to do. Summarize the answer, please. And other questions. Have you ever been so excited that you've lost your sense of logic and reasoning? How long does it take for excitement to wane? 1 hour, 1 day, 3 days? What? Number 2. The Torah has father and son traveling for 3 days, and the Torah does not include any words that are spoken. Did father and son speak to each other during these days, or were they completely silent? If they spoke, what did they say? And actually, there are some beautiful, beautiful midrashim kind of trying to fill in what happened during those 3 days. Okay. Okay, on the third day. Okay, we will return to you. What's the problem here? Right? Right, we will return to you. What's Rashi's problem going to be here? And Rashi's solution is Abraham was convinced that he would return down the mountain with his son. He's convinced. He's kind of like saying, he's kind of like visualizing the end, right? Right? One additional question is Abraham saying this not to alarm the servants, or does he really understand that God is not going to make him go through with the act, which was Giles' idea as well? And of course, does this read show Abe as a willing follower, questioner, or challenger, or doesn't prove one or the other? Okay, next, he took the wood, placed it upon his father's head, and the two of them walked together. Abraham said, so you have to, there's one question here, but in context with the verse 6 and 8. And so what is that question? Look at that. They have the two of them walk together. In this way, two of them walk together. What's Rashi's question going to be? And here's what Rashi says as his answer. Why do you think the phrase "and the two of them went together" is repeated? The first time it's said, the phrase speaks of Abraham, whose mind is equally at peace with that of his son, who doesn't know anything about what will happen. The second time that this phrase is used, it's talking about Yitzhak, who now understands what will happen. He continues walking together with his father, together as equals in mind and spirit. So my question is, if this midrash that you just read is correct, then why doesn't Yitzhak also receive a reward for going through with the Akedah? How old is Yitzhak? Number 2, how old is Yitzhak during the scene and the scene of the entire Akedah? Some say 37, some say he's 5, others say he's 13. What have we learned already in this formative? Okay, next one. Yitzhak said to Abraham, his father, "Father, I am. Here is where's wood," and two of them walked together. We just saw it. Okay, next. They came to a place that God had told them of. There, Abraham built a sacrifice site and arranged the wood and bound his son Yitzhak, placed him on top of the sacrifice site atop the wood. And Abraham stretched out his hand to kill and took the knife to kill his son. A messenger came from heaven and said, "Abraham, Abraham," and he said, "Here I am." What's our question here? So Rashi is going to question Abraham, and what's Rashi going to say? God says Abraham's name twice to show how much he loves him. One additional question: when you call someone's name twice, describe the type of person whose name needs to be said twice in order for him or her to hear. Is Rashi's midrash or idea correct? Okay, next. What's Rashi's problem going to be with this, or where's the problem? Don't stretch out your hand against the boy. Don't do anything to him. Why does Rashi have a question here? And so Rashi's saying, why does it say the same thing twice? Don't stretch out your hand. Don't do anything to him. And this is a slightly gruesome answer, right? Abraham thought to himself, "Here I brought my son all the way and was prepared to sacrifice him to God. Now God has said that I should not sacrifice him, but perhaps I should go ahead and cut him a little bit to draw a little bit of blood." As Abraham turns to do this, God says, "Don't do anything." So, additional question. Avraham is, so first of all, summarize, because that's an interesting one to summarize. Avraham is in the moment. Why do you think he asks to hurt his son? The Torah does not ever record Yitzhak talking with his father again. If you look closely at the text, father and son do not even come down the mountain or return home together. How does this midrash explain what might have happened? Hint. Some traditions actually have it that Avraham actually did kill Yitzhak, and then God brings him back to life. And that when we say the words in our Amidah prayer that we say 3 times a day, God, you are the bringer of back to life, we're actually supposed to be thinking of how God brought Yitzhak back to life. Crazy, huh? Okay. And again, so does this reading show Abraham as a follower, questioner, or nothing? Okay. And if we take all of this together, what might we be saying? You might have to look back a little bit and kind of look at all your answers to kind of how Rashi thinks about the story. Is Rashi thinking that that if we read the story closely, are we getting a sense that Abraham is actually a follower, that Abraham is actually a challenger, or is actually Rashi not really consistent in his ideas of like that maybe Abraham's a little bit of challenger, a little bit of follower, like not quite sure. Like, is Rashi if you had to say like Rashi tends towards one side, tends towards the side of Abraham is actually a challenger, we just need to read the text closely to see it, or Abraham is a follower, we just need to read the text slowly, or Abraham goes back and forth, and that's just kind of the nature of who he is. Okay. Ethan had a couple questions that we want to get to before that he never got to. Okay. One of those questions was, why does God care to this extent about obedience? Why does this need for control indicate? What does this need for control indicate about God's relationship with the Jewish people? So there's 2 questions there. 1, why does God care to this extent about obedience? And 2, what does this need for control indicate about God's relationship with the Jewish people? Next question. If the story tells us that it's a test from the outset, who is being tested? Abraham, God, the reader, or the concept of what a test is as well? Beautiful question. Love to hear your answer. And of course, a question that we'll all have to ask is Sodom and Gomorrah versus this story. Why is Abraham allowed or allows himself, or God allows Abraham to disobey at Sodom and Gomorrah, but not here, right? Is it because, right, Abraham's kind of butting in? Is it because God specifically wants, that Abraham senses in one case that God wants there to be a disapproval, but not? I don't like. So Ethan is doing the right thing, like asking the question that every reader asks: why does Abraham act in a way that makes us cheer during the Sodom and Gomorrah story, and why does Abraham act in a way that makes us a little bit maybe cry in the Akedah story? And I believe that's your final question of the formative. Yeah.